Hi, it's Jim. It's August 13th, 2020. Here's your COVID-19 update for Georgia for today. And we're going to start with deaths. 82 deaths reported today. That's up 40 from last week. So if you do the math, that's almost a 100% increase from last week. Some people call that doubling. However you want to put it, it's a big number. The other thing that it did to drive the big number is it moved the 7-day average now to 73. If you look back last week, the 7-day average was 51. So we are averaging 22 more deaths a day than we were this time last week. Big numbers, and I don't expect it to change because if you look back at the last 3 Fridays, we averaged 81 death reports. So I expect another big number tomorrow, which is going to put us over the top for deaths for the week, because right now we are only about 20 deaths off of last week's record number of death reports. So it is a sad week for COVID-19 deaths here in Georgia, and I haven't heard a ton about this out of our Georgia officials. The only thing I've heard this week really are the opening of the new testing center, which I'll touch on in a second, and the unfortunate pictures of opening day at some of the schools. So we'll just wait and see what we hear going forward. I'm sure there's a plan. I hope there's a plan. There must be a plan. Okay, let me get into some of the other data here. Below average testing day, only 27,000 tests. That's down 15% from last week. We did add that new capacity at Hartsfield-Jackson in one of the parking lots was taken over for drive-through testing. It's supposed to be allowing 5,000 a day. So when you consider that there's more capacity, the question then becomes, is it lower desire to test, or are there slow reporting issues? So are there still backlogs on getting test results back? I did a little look at DeKalb County to see what their wait was like, and you can get next day testing at the big DeKalb County test site this week. So that was a 3-day lead a couple of weeks ago. So it doesn't feel like, and again, sample of 1, so maybe I'm wrong and the rest of the state is a mess, but it doesn't feel like the capacity is down. So it will typically be either desire to test or throughput. So I think the next few days will tell that, but interesting to watch that be down. When we factor in our average of about 10% positive rate, that means we had only 2,500 new positive tests. That is down 21% from last week. Again, I'll give the caution, the asterisk. The last 3 Fridays have all been above average for new case reports. So we may be in for yet another big Friday, in which case we'll see that trend pop back up and stay flat. If we have a Friday more like the Thursday we've had here, that would be, I think, a pretty good positive that maybe things are slowing down a little bit. But as I've said the last couple of days, my money's not on that because of all the school openings and the other things that are driving case changes. Let's go over to the hospital side of things. The new hospitalizations was right on last week's number, within 10, 212 new hospitalizations from last week. We're down and seeing this kind of flatten out here at this about 225 a day average, and that's been consistent now for the better part of a week. So hopefully we'll be staying at that level. I think that would be beneficial. Obviously, we'd like to see it way lower, but down off peak is going to be good right now. The CCU capacity is at 86% utilization, and we did have Region K drop out of that list of 8 sites we had that were over 90%. Region K, pop that up here. Region K is the the Albany area, I'm told Albany area, and they dropped down to 87% today. We saw yesterday. I talked about this use number was a record number. We did fall off that 17 yesterday from yesterday to today, but we also had some beds come out of inventory as well, so that kind of netted out any additional capacity or any relief we might have gotten from that 86% number in the CCU data. All right, last item to touch on from a hospitalization perspective, the GEMA active hospitalizations. These are butts in beds with COVID-19, to say it probably too crudely, but there you go. The number is 2,807, 2,807 active beds in use. The nice thing about that number is it's the 15th of July, or it's the 13th of August. If we rewind back to the 15th of July, that is the last time it was below this number. It was 2780 something. So we are seeing it come off the total of a month ago, which is nice. So hopefully we'll continue to see that. I won't recap all the stuff I've talked about the last couple of days as far as what ifs and watching Paulding County and Cherokee County and those kind of things. So we'll just hang in there at this point. Last thing on this chart is take a look at the RT trend. This is the spread of infection and how they state it as how many other people one infected person would infect as well. This was down to 0.91. It's now back up to 0.96. They restated some of their data today on the rt.live site where I get this from. So if you actually look back at yesterday's, I think they show it as 0.95 from yesterday. But I kind of document this every day they put it out versus go back and reset the trend. So creeping up a little bit from where they had it earlier this week, still right around that 1.0 mark. And we want to see it below that. That should help. But we'll keep watching that as we go forward. I touched on the schools a little quickly. I didn't put the whole list in here because it's now 90 plus incidents at this point. Biggest items here, North Paulding County High School, they have 28 new incidents. The school's going to be closed for the rest of the week, and then they start a new hybrid schedule next week. Woodstock in Cherokee County, Woodstock High, they're closing till the 31st. They have 12 confirmed cases and 275 quarantines. And then at Georgia Military College down in Milledgeville, they have at least 2 cases because they said students versus student. So I'm going to take that as multiple cases, but no additional data on what's going on in Milledgeville there. And then we also are watching Polk County. They're going to a new hybrid schedule as well. So they something else to watch there. 40 new cases, 275 quarantined based on those reports as of this morning. I did check before I started recording this, and I haven't seen any new reports this afternoon. But we also are just having 1 or 2 new schools starting here, starting classes here in the next couple of days. All right. I want to go over to the stat of the day. Had some requests to talk about death data a little bit. Started a big thread on Reddit yesterday about information related to COVID-19 reports of deaths versus total deaths versus excess deaths. So let me just kind of step through these three different data points. And I think from looking at them, they're all roughly saying the same thing. But let me step through them a little bit. Right now, as of today, 4538 COVID 19 deaths. If you look back at the data from mid July, and I'm using July 19th as the marker point here, we had about 3,500 deaths. We'll just use round numbers. About 3,500 deaths. So we've had another 1,000 deaths in the last month. The CDC publishes data on all deaths as well as pneumonia-related deaths. When you look at the pneumonia-related deaths, there are additional 1,400 deaths when you compare the run rate of pneumonia deaths from 2018 to the run rate of pneumonia deaths from 2020. The consensus in the discussion in the thread seems to be this incrementality is likely not a pneumonia outbreak, but COVID cases that were diagnosed to be more pneumonia-like than COVID-like. So they are certainly related to the pandemic. But I think if I look at this data point, I would say we're not overcounting deaths for COVID, and we're not automatically bucketing things in as COVID deaths just because we could, which is some of the analysis that has been out there, or at least some of the memes have been saying this, that people are just calling it COVID in order to get $17,000 from the government for everybody, those kind of, ridiculous things that are out there. These are the same people who say, I can't breathe when I wear a mask, so I don't know that I have a lot of use for them when I see people in England wearing 10 masks and running a marathon. So it's just excuses at this point. Okay, sorry, off on a tangent. Additional overall deaths. So if you look at the run rate from mid-March to mid-July of just volume of people dying in the state of Georgia, there were 3,419 additional deaths. Like I said, for COVID, there are 3,500 deaths. That drops us down to the New York Times excess death analysis. And they said, year over year, we're seeing about 5,000 additional deaths. And I feel like this is the right number because it takes into account the COVID deaths, it takes into account some pneumonia deaths, and it probably also takes into account some deaths that we're seeing from things like quarantine-related items. So closely associated deaths because of additional alcoholism, additional suicides, those types of things. And I know it's a really grim thing to talk about, but I think it's realistic to at least bring up. So overall, through mid-July, we're up about 5,000 deaths in the state. That seems to correlate mostly to COVID. If you consider some things like less people driving, so there were fewer deaths from auto accidents and that kind of thing, then you're probably in the 6,000 range. Again, feels like when you're on a volume that is, I think Georgia had, I'm looking at my data here, I think Georgia had 114,000 deaths a year or something like that. It's got 2,900 deaths in this 18-week view that I did. So Georgia averages about 1,500 deaths a week. And you could do the math based on how many that is a year. But it all seems to work out. I guess that's my point. Should some of the pneumonia deaths be classified as COVID deaths? Probably. Should some of the COVID deaths be classified as pneumonia deaths? Hard to say. Overall, are there other deaths related to the pandemic that we're seeing? Yes. The net of that is about 5,000. That seems to be a well-vetted number, and people are comfortable that that's about where we're at in Georgia. So while you see and that would be through mid-July. So while you see the 4538, I think you could easily go in and add 15 or 20% to that and consider that the total societal impact of deaths from the COVID-19 pandemic. Not necessarily COVID related, not necessarily COVID infected, but COVID related because they're related to the pandemic as a whole. Hopefully that is clearer than mud. Can talk about it some more if you want. I will link the pandemic discussion in the YouTube thread below with the other metrics if you want to get in and look at that information a little bit more. It was a very interesting discussion with the Georgia group, so thank you to everybody who contributed. Wrapping it up for a Thursday, want to remind everybody that I will be back tomorrow. Come discuss all this stuff. We do it on Reddit every day. That is at the link below, reddit.com/r/coronavirus, the coronavirus GA for Georgia. If you want to make some comments, you can do it there. You can also leave me notes here on the YouTube channel, and I will try and get to them. If you see any school reports, appreciate you giving me a heads up somehow, some way, and we'll try and accomplish all of this and bring you all the updates again tomorrow. Until then, have a nice night, nice morning, whatever the case may be.